Afterlife of Alanna Miller. Book 3 in the Nightmares Trilogy. Written by Demelza Carlton. Autonarrated by AI Charlotte from Google. 36. I usually didn't pay much attention to the band or the music when I was working. There were too many other things to occupy my mind. Like why Otto hadn't turned up for work this week, and he wasn't answering his phone either. He wouldn't be the first, not even the 10th guy to decide that security wasn't for him and not even bother to give notice. The welfare office sent unemployed guys on a short course in security, and my boss, Dennis, was a sucker for hiring them. If they looked intimidating enough, even the few weeks' work he'd get out of them was good enough for him. Most new staff didn't stay long. Not to say all of them were bad, actually some of them made decent security guards and they wanted the job. There were always a few who were so inured to welfare handouts that they couldn't stick with any job for long, but Otto hadn't struck me as one of those. He was a good solid bloke to position outside the band's exit door, because he looked scary enough to deter all but the most crazed fan. No, he was like most of the new security guards we hired, just there to collect a paycheck to pay their bills. If another job came up that paid better or had better hours, they'd be gone and replaced with new ones who felt the same way. There were a few who were more experienced, who knew what to look for in order to stop trouble before it started. Then there were the ones who started trouble all on their own. Without him here tonight, exit duty fell to me. Wonderful. Especially as last night's concert had demonstrated that this band's fangirls were the crazy, screaming variety I liked least. I moved around a lot, checking that everyone was where they were supposed to be, wanting to be nearby in case trouble did start. I found myself humming along with the music, and I realized it was familiar. This was an Australian band. I'd heard them a fair bit on the radio and even liked a few of their songs. Maybe I'd bought one of their albums. If I hadn't, I should. That made a nice change, working with background music I liked. I had a vague feeling that I'd fallen asleep to their music before, a remarkable feat in itself, but that wasn't going to happen now, while I was working. I focused on the crowd, catching myself humming or singing the words under my breath more than once. The band finished their final set. The stage went dark and people started to head outside. As the arena cleared, I left it to the rest of my team and headed for the backstage entrance. When the band left, I'd need as many staff there as I could get. As I waited, I thought of Caitlin. I wondered if she would have wanted to go to this concert. What would it have been like to have been two in the crowd instead of outside of it, watching for trouble? Would she have enjoyed it? I couldn't remember this band being around when I knew her before, when I might have asked her if she liked them. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a small shape in the clear space beside the back entrance, wearing a dark sweater and jeans. For a second I thought it was her, but the girl darted between two other security guards and into the small crowd of fans waiting for the band, and I lost sight of her. Sensing trouble, I followed and grabbed the girl's arm before she could get any further away and pulled her back to the light at the entrance. "Hey, wait a minute. What were you doing there?" I boomed in a loud voice I only used for work. A heavy hand came down on my shoulder. "Let her go." This voice was soft with the implied threat of violence. Like a razor-sharp knife in a tissue paper sheath. I turned to see the face that matched the voice and recognized the band's security consultant. Someone had told me this guy was an ex-US Marine. He was American, certainly, and he demonstrated he knew how to protect people better than I did, when we'd discussed security arrangements before the start of the concert. So what was this girl and why? I realized I wasn't holding her anymore, my hands up near my shoulders to show they held nothing. She didn't run back into the crowd as I'd expected, she stayed standing next to me. The security consultant's gaze dropped from my face to hers. Small warm fingers slid up my chest, under my jacket and under his hand. I inhaled sharply and closed my eyes as the memory hit. her hands sliding around me as I held her on that benighted beach. A beach full of police officers, who all wanted to help her, and she clung to me. She'd been scared and cold, clinging to me for the warmth I could give her to stave off hypothermia. Cold arms and hands and... It's cold tonight, how come her hands were so warm? Warm fingers effortlessly pried off the vice on my shoulder. I didn't need to look at her face, nor hear her voice. I knew it was Caitlin. It was her fingers on top of my left shoulder, and her palm resting against the scar that was all that remained of where I'd been shot. I didn't need to look at her, but I sure as hell wanted to. She was close enough to touch, her shirt brushing against my work jacket, so that I could feel the heat of her body through my shirt. I ached to touch her, to wrap my arms around her and not let her go, but I didn't dare do it. It's all right, Trevor. She smiled at him, the rueful smile I'd seen endlessly in dreams. I was going to ask if Nathan could see me safely home tonight. A chance comment, only just remembered. Her rock star boyfriend. I felt my stomach plunge down to my feet, and hit the concrete paving. I noticed the drip of liquid on the pavement, and followed the path of it up to the source. Her hair was wet, the end of her braid dripping as if she'd just gotten out of the shower and she'd been in too much of a hurry to take the time to dry it properly. Why did she take the time for a shower after the concert, yet not have time to dry herself? A shout behind me heralded the kind of trouble I expected. The male singer who headed the band had appeared, and the scantily dressed, heavily made-up girls clustered near the entrance surged toward him. Yet Trevor, the security consultant, stood by and didn't budge. I itched to do the job I was here to do, but Caitlin's fingers lingered on my shoulder and I was loath to move away from her. All three of us stood and watched as the girls crowded around him, hiding him from view for a moment before he emerged, now with a girl on each arm, headed toward a dark limousine parked nearby. Caitlin lifted her chin. You'd best make sure Jason gets to the limo without too many of them along. That thing only seats 8, and he's already invited way too many people to his private after-party. She winked at Trevor. Then you get an early night. I know Josie's waiting for you in a hotel room somewhere nearby. Trevor jerked his head toward me. You trust him? His eyes were on Caitlin as if I wasn't there. Caitlin's face lit up with a smile. Her eyes met mine as she replied, with my life. Trevor hurried off toward the singer, who I realized I recognized as Caitlin's green friend, the one who visited her in hospital so many years ago. You're dating him? I asked her incredulously, as she calmly watched him take off with half a dozen girls who were certainly after more than just his autograph. Her eyes narrowed. Have the orderlies been spreading stories again? I told one of them I had to leave early to meet my friend, who'd just flown in for a concert this week. How can you be a doctor and date him? He loses his lunch at the first sight of blood. I wailed. That doesn't stop him being my business partner. He sings better than I do and he definitely gets the fans more excited than I ever could, but he'd have nothing to sing about if I hadn't written all his music. His bass guitar work can't carry the melody and he wouldn't have a recording contract without me. She laughed quietly, sounding harder and more businesslike. I probably should have asked for more than him given that I do more work, but I don't really need more, and when he makes his flamboyant exit I get to slip out unseen. She eyed me thoughtfully. Or I would if you hadn't been here. I'm sorry, I responded automatically. I was sorry that I'd messed up her plans, sorry that she had to find out I was nothing but a hired security guard like this, and sorry that she needed a security detail after the events of 5 years ago. Don't be. I missed you tonight, and I intended to call you when I got home. Now I won't have to. Come home with me tonight? She looked way too eager. Sure. The word was out of my mouth before my brain knew what it was saying. I have to stick around until we empty the place and lock up though. It might take an hour. She wouldn't want to wait that long for me. Not when she had rock stars and groupies and God only knew who else to take care of her. She shrugged. I don't mind. I'll be up for a while. I'm always pretty buzzed for hours after a show. I always thought musicians needed drugs to get high, but when you've got thousands of people screaming your name, or at least the name of the band, no drug can compare to that high. I'll miss it now this tour's over. She swung her arms, raring to go. So, what do you want me to do? Patrol the place with you? I promise not to harass the band. If she walked by my side, I'd have eyes for nothing else. Someone could set fire to the arena and I wouldn't notice a damn thing. And I'd be worried that something might happen to her if she were out here on her own, or even waiting in her car. No, I began slowly, I think you'd be better off waiting for me in the security office. It's where all the surveillance feeds go, so you can watch me on the dozen or so screens in there and it's secure, so you'll be safe there until I can leave. She grinned. Sure. I'll keep an eye on things for you. 37. Nathan swung his arms wider as we walked through the deserted arena, as if he was trying to make himself look bigger and scarier. Whenever we encountered someone else, he stiffened and looked at them suspiciously while moving just that bit closer to me. I found myself smiling at the protective display, knowing it wasn't necessary. No one recognized me. No one ever did. 5 years of working in one of Australia's most popular bands and no one looked twice at me. The spotlight was on Jason both on stage and off, we'd made sure of that from the beginning. So without my dramatic dark clothes and makeup, I was just another groupie or teenage fan to most people. Hell, they didn't even know my name. So much for a rock star life. The money was nice though. And walking onto that stage, knowing that they were cheering for the band I'd built, from writing the songs and securing a deal, to locking Jason in his hotel room on tour, so I knew he'd be there come concert time. He'd only disappeared once. It was after we'd opened for another band, but we were playing our own show 2 nights later in a much more intimate club. I'd insisted on a meeting the afternoon before the concert just so we could take a look around the venue, and he hadn't turned up. 2 hours later, Trevor produced him, wearing a pair of handcuffs, a black vinyl G-string and not much else. That's the day Trevor became my permanent security chief, at Jason's expense. Well, that was one thing I wouldn't miss, worrying about whether he'd turn up trashed to a concert or not at all. I was done babysitting grown men who should know better. Well, I stole a glance at Nathan. He wasn't exactly capable of taking care of himself either, but that wasn't through being irresponsible. He had an excuse and I owed him a debt. If I took care of Nathan, it wasn't babysitting at all, but repaying a favor that was long overdue. Just as long as I didn't have to deal with finding him twined around several naked women. I wanted him twined around me and only me. If he didn't want that, well, then he could go find someone else who was more to his taste. I surveyed the long line of framed posters advertising upcoming shows. Ooh, Blue Phoenix. They're doing an Aussie tour? It's been a while since their last one. Nathan halted. Who? I laughed. Blue Phoenix. They're really big in the US, but they're actually a UK band. Jason's a big fan and he persuaded me to agree to open for them at some of their East Coast shows. I liked their music well enough, but what I didn't know is that their concert after parties are legendary. Jason thought he was in heaven. When he finds out, he'll beg me to stage a comeback so we can tour with them. I'll go to the concert with you if you want. They are good. Never heard of them. But if they party like your sleazy singer, I'll probably be working that concert. Me and every other security guard they can pull on shift for that. Nathan swiped his pass card over a scanner and punched a code into the keypad, then shouldered open the unmarked door beside it. We're here. You should be safe in the office. Don't open the door for anyone. I assured him I wouldn't. Nathan lingered for a moment, then caught sight of something on one of the monitors over my shoulder and unclipped the radio from his belt. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he promised, lifting the radio to his lips as the security door thudded shut behind him, leaving me alone with the security monitors. I sank onto a stool in front of the screens and sighed. Despite my feigned excitement in front of Nathan, the prospect of an hour in the security office was boring as all hell, but I figured it was worth the wait. Spending the rest of my evening with Nathan was definitely better than sitting at home by myself, as I had after so many other concerts on the East Coast. And I'd rarely been into the security office for such a big facility. I tried to ignore the screens, but they quickly sucked me in. Drunk fans staggered through the foyer as the merchandise people packed up. The road crew smoked homemade cigarettes outside one of the roller doors, rolling more on the loading dock. I wondered idly if it was tobacco or something else. I'd never bothered to ask. An unfamiliar man in a uniform like Nathan's marched along the corridor outside, then paused at the door. I heard the keypad beep and the grinding of the electronic lock before the door swung open, and I was face to face with a man I didn't know. "Who are you? You're not supposed to be here. Get out," he ordered, striding forward. I smiled politely. "Nathan told me to stay here." I deliberately slowed my breathing, trying to stave off panic. "Nathan Miller? Bullshit. He's the one who said he'd castrate the first bloke who brought unauthorized personnel into a restricted area, because this band's security chief is one mean bastard. They say he was a Marine in Afghanistan. I'm not losing my balls for some teenage fangirl. Out." He reached for the baton on his belt. I stared at him. Trevor had evidently made quite an impression. But that baton had better stay where it was, or this man's genitals were the least of his worries. "No, I'll be staying right here, thank you." "No, you won't. If you don't get out on your own, I'm authorized to remove you. Forcibly if necessary." He curled his fingers into fists, flexing his arm muscles. They were probably impressive by most people's standards. "I'm sure you don't want that. Best if you just do as you're told, okay, sweetheart?" "It's best if you don't touch me," I replied carefully, eyeing his hands. Surely he couldn't be that stupid. Both arms stretched for me. Evidently he was. His fingertips touched my shoulder. And my night went to hell. 38. I left the police with the two would-be prize fighters, who decided to start a punch-up outside the side entrance. I couldn't get any sense out of the drunks, and it was better if they sobered up in the cells for the night, where they couldn't hurt anyone else. What I'd give for a job that didn't involve breaking up brawls. Every damn concert had one. Even the Wiggles one, two mothers screeching at each other, manicured claws out as they pulled each other's hair while their toddlers threw tantrums on the grass. I'd had enough for one night, and the foyer was empty. I intended to lock up, go home and leave the place to the two night shift guys, though I hadn't seen them in over an hour. Irritated that I couldn't even raise Steve or Jerry on the radio, I strode back to the control room, to see if I could find them on the security cameras. If they were holed up backstage with a couple of fangirls, there'd be hell to pay. I swung the door open and stopped dead. What the fuck happened here? Jerry scooted along the floor, twisting so he could see me. His handcuffs jingled as he sat up. He opened his mouth, but he didn't seem to have the power of speech. My eyes darted to the bar stool where I'd left Caitlin. The empty bar stool now. Where's the girl? I demanded. Did they take her? What girl? Jerry grunted, wincing as he shifted. I pulled my keys out of my pocket and fitted one into the handcuffs. All of ours were all keyed alike, so it only took a moment to free him. The girl I left here, waiting until I came back. What did they look like? The guys who took her. He rubbed his wrists. Dunno. I didn't get a good look at them, but I figure it must have been at least 2 big guys to take both of us down. Maybe 3. Armed too. I walked in and saw Steve on the floor over there, handcuffed to the post, so I did what you just did and tried to free him. They hit me from behind and I woke up handcuffed to the other post and my pockets empty. No keys, no radio, no nothing. He nodded at Steve, who looked to be unconscious. Wake him up. Maybe he knows. I nodded. I will. You start filling out an incident form before you forget anything important. I need details. All of them. Or I wouldn't be able to find who'd taken Caitlin. Shit, how'd they get in here? I grabbed a bottle of water from the desk and poured it over Steve's face. He woke spluttering. Where's he slurred. Where's who? I asked. Where's that girl? His head jerked as he searched the room. Knocked me out. I asked Jerry to help me get free and they got him again, then me. Must have been 3 big blokes waiting to ambush me. I went down fighting, I swear, Miller. For a bloke who'd gone down fighting, his face was remarkably unhurt. His knuckles too, I noticed. No sign of damage except for a couple of tiny rips in the front of his shirt. My bullshit meter overloaded. These guys were lying, one or both of them, I wasn't sure. Had someone paid them off to get to Caitlin? Did they say where they were taking the girl? I asked slowly. How long ago did they leave? Both hesitated for a moment too long before replying. While they argued over the correct answer, I ignored them and headed for the storeroom where we kept the spare equipment. I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to face it, all I saw was our sole riot control shield. The clear plastic reflected the shelves when the light hit it just right, and it took me a moment to realize what I was looking at. My breath whooshed out of me with relief and I reached up to the top shelf. Are you all right? I asked as Caitlin took my hand, swinging her legs over the edge of the shelf. She nodded and waved me out of the way as she twisted to dangle from her hands before dropping to the floor. What did the men look like? The ones who came in here? Her voice was barely louder than a whisper. Security uniforms like yours. The first one tried to make me leave. When he touched me, I took him out. The second came in as I was restraining the first. I had to knock him out too, before I was sure whether he was a danger or not. She looked grave. I had a crazy urge to burst out laughing. Caitlin had taken out my best security guards. Could tonight get any crazier? I'll protect you, I promised, curling an arm around her shoulders. To my surprise and relief, she leaned into my side as if she welcomed the support. Together, we returned to the office. Steve, Jerry, this is Alanna. I hoped they didn't notice my hesitation as I stumbled over her name. She's lucky she didn't end up trussed up like you or worse. Silence. I peered at Jerry's report. Biker helmets? So you didn't even see their faces? He shook his head. Should I search the security footage for them? They took the tape, he suggested, as if even he didn't believe his own cock and bull story. I sighed. Look, I can send you two to hospital to get checked out, and we can file an incident report about what really happened, or I can ask a doctor to check you out here and we can pretend this was all a bad dream. There was no way in hell either of them would admit they were bested by a girl, let alone one as fragile-looking as Caitlin. Will you get a doctor this time of night? Steve asked. Angel, would you be willing to help? Once we know they're okay to finish their shift, we can go. Caitlin nodded and cautiously approached Steve. He flinched as she dropped to a crouch beside him, but he allowed her to examine him. Jerry didn't take his eyes off her all through his own examination until she returned to my side. I'd never seen these men scared before, but they were terrified of her. I checked them earlier while they were both stunned. They might have some residual muscle cramps from the taser, but those will subside in a day or so. They should be fine. If not, send them to me and I'll check them over again. The taser? So that's how she'd knocked them out. That kid's a doctor? Steve spluttered. I inclined my head. This is Dr. Alanna Miller. She's just taken a job at Fiona Stanley Hospital. She was waiting in here for me as it was supposed to be safer than outside. Given the helmeted tape-stealing bikers though, it's probably a good thing she hid in the storeroom and let you guys take the heat. I tried to grin, but it came out more like a grimace. At least we're trained for it. We'll be headed off now. If there's any more signs of the mystery bikers, call me on my mobile, okay? Jerry nodded slowly as he buckled on his utility belt. Can you get these off me? Steve grumbled, lifting his handcuffed wrists. I left Steve and Jerry to it. 39. I followed Caitlin's car back to her place, then walked her to the stairwell. Please, will you come up for a drink? Or two? The quiet desperation in her tone tugged at my heart. I couldn't refuse her anything. I agreed and followed her up. Just give me a moment to go tidy up. Help yourself to whatever you like while you're waiting. She waved vaguely at the kitchen as she headed to her bedroom. When she returned, I was halfway through drinking my second glass of water. You don't want any alcohol? She asked, still seeming more nervous than she should be. I shrugged. I figured I'd wait and see what you were having, and water's not a bad thing to start with. Slowly, she nodded as she opened the pantry and stretched for something on the top shelf. I watched her for a few seconds before I gave in and offered, "Do you need help?" She shook her head and edged a box off the shelf. When she set it on the bench, I couldn't hide my surprise. After tonight, I think a stiff drink is in order. If I open it, will you share it with me? I eyed the bottle of Johnny Walker Blue Label she held out to me, the unbroken seal taunting me that I didn't deserve the expensive spirit it guarded. Don't you have anything else? I mean, that stuff's supposed to be savored. If all you want is to drown your sorrows and forget, you'd be better off with the Red Label. Caitlin laughed. That's what I usually have, a shot of that with a mixer when I get home. But tonight I just want to drink it straight, which calls for the good stuff. And I don't think even the whole bottle will make me forget, so it'd be pretty pointless to try. She reached into the cupboard and clunked 2 glasses to the counter. So, will you join me in a drink? A deft twist of her hand broke the seal and she poured a precise 2 fingers into one glass. The smell wafting up was potent, seductive. I nodded and watched the amber liquid glug into my glass. The aroma stole into my nostrils and invaded my mind. I wondered if it could dissolve my brain, and whether I'd notice. Caitlin's explosive coughing fit made me set the drink down again so I could stop her from choking, but she waved away my offers of assistance. Shit, that's strong, she said hoarsely, squinting into her glass before taking another sip. I gulped half of mine without tasting it, feeling it sear my throat on the way down. I held the second mouthful a little longer, rolling around until I tasted it, then let it burn my esophagus too. It's like drinking petrol. My voice came out almost as hoarse as hers had. She smiled and carried her glass over to the couch. When she slumped onto the seat, I realized just how exhausted she was. Cautiously, I sat on the opposite end, where I had a clear view of her face. You're taking this awfully well. Me being in Chaya and all, and me not saying anything. I shrugged. I didn't tell you I was a security guard either, but that doesn't seem to worry you. After worrying about what she'd think of me, it was a relief. I hadn't even started thinking about the implications of her being a rock star. No, retired rock star, this was the last concert on her band's farewell tour. Caitlin concentrated on sipping her drink for a moment before replying, "I already knew. Trevor makes me check all the security guards before a show, so I know who they are and if anyone's not there who should be. Also, if there's anyone I recognize who poses a greater risk than others. I told him I knew you but that I wanted you on the security team. I was hoping to see you last night, and I'd almost given up when you grabbed me tonight. All that instinct of wanting to fight back and escape, but I knew it was you who had me, so I didn't resist. Would you still have grabbed me if you knew I was carrying a taser?" I swallowed more whiskey. "Those things aren't legal in Australia, you know? If the police find out you have it." She laughed. "Oh, they're legal if you have a permit, and I do. In all states and both territories too. Right alongside my gun licenses. It was one of the weird conditions of my witness protection, that I was supposed to carry a weapon. I always wondered if it was one of Mott's ploys to make sure I had a weapon on me when he sent someone to kill me. Dodgy bastard would have wanted me dead, and suicide would have suited him nicely. I had a long talk with Trevor about it, and he arranged for the taser permit. I think the argument was along the lines that, as a doctor, I didn't like the idea of shooting people to protect myself, as I'd be bound to provide medical assistance afterwards that would place me in even greater danger, but use of a non-lethal weapon with no long-term effects. I can think of two men whose pride is going to be hurt for a long time, knowing you bested them with a taser. The minute the words were out of my mouth, I regretted them." Tears flowed down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Nathan. I didn't mean for any of that to happen tonight. Those two men shit, I'm sorry." I desperately wanted to tell her that everything would be all right, but the words would be an empty promise I couldn't keep. They're trained to be able to take down an attacker. If you manage to overcome them, they'll need more training. Simple as that. I don't think either of them wants to admit what happened tonight, so they won't spread stories. It could cost them their jobs. So it'll be a closely guarded secret that they'll do their best to forget. End of story. She shook her head. "No. I'm not worried about that. It's that I attacked two men who weren't trying to hurt me, they were only doing their jobs. The guys from ASIO said I'd be safe here. I'm beginning to think I'm paranoid, seeing threats everywhere when there aren't any. It wasn't this bad in Melbourne, but now I'm back here and with the mystery stalker and that house and even you. Not that you're a bad thing, Nathan, just that I'm worried about you. I feel like I'm going crazy." "You're not crazy. Perfectly true. You are very protective of yourself and that's reasonable, given what you've been through. Mostly true. Most rape victims didn't have tasers. If you say you have a stalker, then I believe you. It's not the first time government staff have lied to you about your safety. The last time I'd helped them, so I skipped to the next point quickly. And what house? This one?" She heaved a heartfelt sigh. "No, not this one. My grandfather's house. My cousin gave it to me as payment of a debt of honor or some crazy idea like that. At least, that's what he told my father. I don't even know what that means. Is it a good debt, or a bad one? I mean, who gives someone a house? For all I know, the house could be wired to explode the minute someone sets foot inside. Why go to so much trouble? Surely an assassin would be cheaper and easier. But I can't sell it unless I know it's safe. I don't want someone else's death on my conscience, not even a ruthless real estate agent." Something seemed fishy. A long-lost cousin offering an enormous inheritance was too good to be true. It sounded like a scam to me. What does your security consultant say about it? Caitlin snorted. "Trevor. The minute I told him, he drove down there himself without telling me. It turns out the place gets cleaned weekly by a company in town. He chased up the cleaner and spoke to her. She believed it was a holiday house and she'd never met the owners. She was hired 5 years ago. About the time I moved to Melbourne. She blew out a breath. Trevor told me to stay away from it. Just because the cleaner's never been blown up, doesn't mean I won't be. I've agreed to meet with my cousin to discuss it, but I need to see the house first before I agree to take it. There's something about it, lurking in the back of my mind. I know I'll stop worrying once I've seen it, but I'm scared of it too. Scared of a house I never saw and probably never set foot in. Her eyes were on me now, looking deeper than I felt comfortable with. I avoided her gaze and focused on drinking my whiskey. Will you come with me? Please? No. Fuck no. I'd take a holiday in hell as the devil's personal whipping boy, before I'd go within 100 kilometers of a place that sounded like another nightmare we should both stay the hell away from. But for Caitlin, I'd do anything. Sure. She threw herself at me, hugging me tightly. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nathan. That'll be one less posse of demons to vanquish. I swear I'll never ask anything of you ever again after this. With her clinging to me, squirming in my lap, I wanted to ask her a few things. Things I shouldn't. Instead I said, should we have another drink to celebrate? To crazy ideas and banishing demons? She laughed and agreed, so we poured a little more whiskey into our glasses and toasted each other's health and the future. Later that night, as I stretched out in bed, I reflected that if they existed, the devil and his demons would probably enjoy being beaten by someone as beautiful as Caitlin. I laughed quietly to myself and let the alcohol in my blood drag me under the surface of sleep. 40. I woke up in the dark, hearing the sound of someone else's rapid breathing inside the room with me. I sat up, looking for the source of it. Caitlin. She lay on her side, facing away from me, silhouetted in the faint light coming from the window and the blind I hadn't closed properly. The curve of her shoulder, her arms bent and resting on the bed beside her. The smooth line down her side to the dip where her waist was, the swell of her hip, sloping down her leg to her foot. Smooth bare skin not marred by any visible scar. I reached out to touch her, to find out if she was real, running my fingers lightly along her side as I pressed my lips to the back of her neck. Not wanting to wake her, I pulled my hand away as she moved. Nathan? She sounded like she'd been crying. Her fingers touched my arm, then she turned and moved closer to me, her body pressed against mine. When she rested her head on my chest, her face was damp. She was crying. What's wrong? I asked immediately, not daring to move in case she moved away. Nothing, she sniffled. I just had a bad dream. I grinned into the dark. You know what you said last time I had a nightmare? What? That we needed to shape a new memory to replace the old one. If all my nightmares ended in phenomenal sex, they'd never frighten me again. Let me take your mind off it, Angel. I listened to her breathing, which wasn't slowing. Her voice was breathless as she said, You mean it? You really mean it? You'd make love to me? After a fashion. I wouldn't give her anything to complain about, that's for sure. If you want me to, Angel. Yes, she breathed. I heard the sound of satin sliding over skin before I felt it, her skin warm against mine, slippery with a thin sheen of sweat from the dream that had woken her. Can you turn the light on though? I'm not good in the dark. I reached over and clicked the switch. Now I could see her beautiful naked body, everything I wanted. I flicked my tongue over her nipple and felt it harden at the touch. More, she gasped, arching her back to offer me her breasts. A gift I took willingly, sucking first one and then the other, before I slid my hand up her thigh. Oh yes, she breathed, parting her legs for me. She was slick with need, her core closing around my fingers as she moaned in pleasure and not pain. With Caitlin, I definitely knew the difference. She rode my hand to her gasping peak, and I kissed her mouth until her shuddering subsided. Better? I asked, withdrawing my fingers. Fuck yes, she groaned, grabbing my hand. Don't stop now. More to make me forget everything. Everything except you. The desire in her eyes was unmistakable, I recognized it now. Caitlin. Angel. Everything I'd ever wanted and more. My angel, whose body felt as heavenly as it looked. And I wanted her to feel it too, deep inside. I wanted to make her forget everything that had ever happened to her before this moment, so that she'd be mine. I drove my fingers deep inside her, kissing her through every gasp until she climaxed, sobbing my name. I kissed my way down her neck and her breasts as she bucked beneath me, my fingers continuing their pleasurable onslaught. I slowed as my lips touched her belly, knowing she was close to her third. She came just as my tongue darted out to taste her essence. God, so sweet, and I wanted more, so I didn't stop, tonguing that tiny bundle of nerve endings that made her fall apart all over again. And again. Until she shattered with a scream, sobbing my name and begging me to continue. She might forget her own name, but she'd never forget mine. I plunged my fingers inside her, surging up the bed to kiss her with the taste of her still on my lips. She moaned at her next climax. I'd lost count of how many times she'd come, and I didn't care. Have you had enough, Angel? I asked tenderly, kissing her neck. No. I want more. More than your fingers and your tongue, Nathan. I want. She cried out as my fingers caressed her insides again. She reached for me, running her hands across my chest as if she wanted to etch every muscle into her memory. More. More. Blood rushed from her caressing fingers straight to my groin, and I wanted to cheer. Tell me what you'd like, Angel, and I'll do it. Her fingers tickled my belly, moving slowly down. You could start with a kiss. Mike's words. Reality came crashing down, dousing my libido in freezing slush. Not even her stroking hands could arouse me now, squeezing my flaccid length as if she could coax life back into it. You really don't want me. Her voice shook. Oh God. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but she propelled herself out of bed and stumbled out of the room. There. She finally knew my secret. I didn't deserve her. And she didn't deserve an impotent loser like me, who could never satisfy her. 41. I'm ashamed to say I cried myself to sleep. What had I expected? Nathan had had years of being able to pull any girl he wanted. A damaged doctor who still had occasional nightmares from 5 years ago wasn't even a blip on his dating radar. When the morning sun streamed in, reality dawned with it. Nathan had given me a precious gift last night, even if he hadn't given me all of himself. He was the only one who could play my body like that, and I was profoundly grateful that he had. None of my dreams were nightmares after that. And he did want me, he'd said so, and I'd seen it in his eyes. He wasn't the first man to suffer impotence as a result of psychological trauma. If I helped him with the trauma, maybe I'd be able to help him with other things too. All in good time. I bounced out of bed and into the shower, relishing the hot water that was nothing compared to the caresses that felt burned into my body after last night. Trust selfless Nathan to use his extraordinary skills to make me feel this good without any thought of reward. I needed to thank him. I cautiously approached the guest room and knocked, but there was no answer. I pushed the door open slowly, glad that it was too new to creak, and stared at the made bed in an otherwise empty room. No Nathan. Bathroom maybe? I'd been too intent on my shower in the ensuite to notice if the other bathroom was occupied. Nope. I searched the house and even the parking lot downstairs before I knew for sure that Nathan had left and taken his car with him. Did he think I was so shallow that I'd throw him out for not sleeping with me? He was my friend before he was anything else. Surely he knew me better than that. Would he still come on holiday with me? Doubt niggled, but he'd promised, and I knew Nathan kept his word. That much couldn't have changed in 5 years, even if everything else had. So sex with him was out. That was fine. I could live with that. I'd ignore my feelings and be what I needed to be, a friend who was helping him deal with the traumatic memories that plagued his dreams. And one who took him on holiday when he needed it. I donned a dress and packed my things. 42. I knocked on the door a second time. His car was here, so I knew he was home. He might be asleep though, given how little sleep either of us had gotten the night before, so I knocked harder in the hope that he'd hear me, wake up and come to answer the door. Just as long as it wasn't. The door flew open and his angry little sister glared at me. You! What are you doing here? I gave her my most professional smile, the one I gave difficult patients right before I decided only a rectal thermometer would suit my observations. Good morning. I came to check on Nathan to make sure he made it home okay last night. Her lip curled in a sneer. You're the slutty doctor who kidnapped him from hospital so you could suck his dick without losing your job? Figures. You're a selfish bitch, you know that? My brother is a sick man. You have no idea what he's been through. If you ever come back here again, I'll call the police and you can suck cock in a cell instead. I hope they charge you with kidnapping and send you to prison. The other prisoners will be queuing up to break a snotty bitch like you. I'm a lawyer and I've heard the stories. You'll be begging for mercy in a day, and the hard cases in the women's prison don't know the meaning of the word. I felt nauseated by her rant, but I swallowed my ire. Nathan's messed up sister wasn't my problem. Nathan's a grown man and perfectly capable of making his own decisions. Now I see why he was so eager to come home with me. Fetch him, please. I barely reached her shoulder, but I knew I was more than a match for her physically, though I hoped it wouldn't come to that. Evidently she didn't share my sentiments as she braced herself in the doorway. Go away. He's not home. I blinked. His car's here. So where is he then? Her eyes darted around as she thought up a lie. With his girlfriend. At the gym. At work. I don't fucking know. He's a grown man who does what he damn well pleases. And now he's already fucked you, he won't do it again, so just go away and don't waste my time. He doesn't want to see you. I heard the sound of a door creaking, then the flow of liquid under pressure. Nathan or her boyfriend. No, a shrew like this wouldn't have a boyfriend. Sounds like he's here and he's awake too. I suggest you ask him what he wants. If Nathan wants me to leave, he's more than capable of saying so. I winked. I wasn't too hard on his tongue last night. She reacted just as I expected. A shriek stream of insults brought Nathan to the door, dressed quite demurely for him of a morning, with a pair of boxer shorts covering the essentials that he felt the need to draw attention to with a vigorous scratch. One of your ex-boyfriends, Chris? Or one of the girls who stole him from you? He asked, peering over her shoulder. I beamed and burst out laughing. Not exactly. Angel, he breathed, disbelief written across his face. You shouldn't be standing on the doorstep. Come in. He wrapped a hand around my upper arm and pulled me inside, shoving his irate sister out of his way. Behind me he bumped the door shut. What are you doing here so early? I didn't think you'd want to see me so soon after last night. I figured I'd call tomorrow or the next day to apologize. I meant to tell you, but I didn't know how. I won't have that bitch in my house, Nathan. Chris shrieked, pointing at me. Nathan's arm curled around me. Don't call her that. It's my house too, and I've put up with enough of your douchebag boyfriends. More tattoos than brain cells and worse at keeping their dicks in their pants than I am, and that's saying something. I smothered a laugh. The mental image of Chris's dissatisfied biker boyfriends was just too funny. Little Miss Bitchy Lawyer buckled down in the bedroom for bikers, or maybe she didn't, and that was the problem. I bet they didn't like her sharp tongue either. Oh God, I couldn't hold in my laughter for much longer. Even the thought of this proud harpy on her knees for some bloke in sweaty leather pants. I'm going out, Chris announced. She better not be here when I get back. She grabbed her bag, flounced out and slammed the door behind her. Nathan led me to the couch. I'm really sorry. I've never seen her like this. I mean, she screams at me occasionally but never at someone she doesn't know. I'll talk to her when she cools down and get her to apologize. Now the girl was gone, I summoned a real smile. How about we leave her to cool down for a bit longer? I'm heading down to Bustleton today. Are you still coming with me? I met his surprised eyes. I really want you to come. He flushed as if he'd caught my double meaning. His unfortunate problem last night was too fresh in both of our minds for him not to. Are you sure? I might not be the most cheerful holiday companion. I'd only drag you down. I haven't been on a holiday in ages, Nathan, and you need a break as much as I do. You said you'd come and I've really been looking forward to spending the time with you. I glanced at the front door. Without anyone else interfering. I still want to, but Chris will hit the roof when I tell her. It'd probably be best if you're not here for that. I laughed softly. I think it'd be best if you're not here for that either. Pack your things and leave her a note. She's your little sister, not your keeper, and she doesn't own you. My bags are in the boot of the car. As soon as you throw your stuff in, we can go. I gazed into his eyes as I saw the glimmering of his acquiescence. I promise I'll take care of you. He grinned. Angel, if I'm coming with you, it'll be me taking care of you, not the other way round. The look in his eyes mystified me for a moment, until I identified it as gratitude. Then get some clothes on so we can go. Check-in's at 2, so we have 3 hours to get there. I want to watch the sunset from the end of the jetty with you. Half an hour later, he locked the front door and stared wistfully at my car. Can I drive? 43. Gravel grated under the tires, startling me from sleep. I peeled my tongue from the roof of my mouth as I twisted my neck to ease the kinks out of it. How long had I slept? Nathan's hand touched my shoulder. Angel? We're here. This is the guest house. I pried my eyes open and was surprised to find that he was telling the truth. Nathan wouldn't have kidnapped me again, I scolded myself. He's a good man and one of the few I trust. I was safer with him than with anyone else I knew. I just needed to get used to trusting someone again. His eyes told me he knew about my doubts, though not the reassurances I banished them with. I leaned over and kissed his cheek, but he pulled away before I could take it any further. Annoyed but understanding, I also got out of the car and stretched my legs. I haven't been here since I was a kid, Nathan said, peering through the front door. Chris was only a baby and Alanna and I shared a room, so we must have been about 5 or 6. Dad took us fishing off the jetty, we went down the beach for a swim every day. Mum said this is where her parents came on their honeymoon. And it's still a guest house more than 50 years later. Actually, the buildings were brought from the old RAF World War II airbase over near Bunnings. 3 buildings and you can still see where the joins are too, a new voice said as the door swung open. The blonde woman grinned. Beth. My husband and I run the place now. She stuck her hand out and looked expectant. Nathan saved me by shaking her hand. Nathan and Alanna Miller. We had 2 rooms booked. Next to each other, please. Beth looked from him to me. Are you expecting anyone else? Shit, I'd never thought that now we had the same last name but didn't look alike, people would assume we were married. No, I answered. She waited as if she expected me to say more, then hitched her smile back up. Well, I've given you 3 and 4. They're not quite next to each other as the linen room's between them, but they're across the hall from each other at the end. She led us inside, pointing as she went. That's the TV room. Through those double doors to the guest dining room where your breakfast will be served. There's a fridge and microwave in there for you to use, and tea and coffee all day. Games room and reading nooks through there. Outside is that way to the back deck and the spa. And these are your rooms. Behind her, the passage ended in an alcove lined with linen-filled shelves. Her spread arms indicated the numbered doors on either side of her. I peeked into one at the same time as Nathan. He wheeled my little suitcase inside. You take this one. I'll have the other one. I nodded. Breakfast menus are on your dresser. Leave them in the kitchen tonight, and I'll have everything prepared for you tomorrow. If you need anything, just let me know, Beth finished with a final smile before she left. I unpacked quickly, kicking my suitcase under the sofa so it wouldn't be in the way, before heading across the hall to see Nathan's room. His was much smaller than mine, with just a bed and no sofa. I hadn't known we'd get such disparate rooms, I thought they were both the same. I opened my mouth to apologize and offer him the better accommodation. You're funding this trip, so you get a better room. Closer to the car too, if for any reason we need to leave in a hurry. I stared at him in alarm. You're stalker, remember? If he tracks us here, I want you to go out the window and drive off. Don't wait for me. Slowly, I nodded. Trevor would say that too. I wet my lips. He'd also lock my door when I retire for the night, so he'd be the only one with a key. I want you to do the same. Suddenly, the thought of a stalker here even on our holiday made the whole thing seem like a terrible idea. Would this never be over? Nathan's arm slid around me, pulling me against him. Warm, firm and safe. No one followed us, Angel. Believe me, I half expected someone to, but not a single car from Perth was with us when we turned off the highway for Busselton. I'm just protecting you, like I said I would. Yes. And I couldn't ask for a better protector than the man who saved my life. My hero. 44. A gentle knock sounded on my open door. I looked up to meet Caitlin's smile. Want to go for a walk along the jetty to see the sunset? Apparently, there's an underwater viewing deck at the end and everything. It was hard to resist her enthusiasm. Sure. I probably need to stretch my legs after that long drive anyway. Even if your car is so much nicer to drive than mine. I'll warn you, it's a long walk though, the jetty's almost 2 kilometers long and the observatory's at the deep end. Her smile only brightened. After walking the wards all day and night at work, it sounds like a lovely stroll. Come on, let's go be tourists. I shoved my feet into my sneakers and followed her out. Do you want to drive or should I? I asked, raising the remote to deactivate the central locking. You can drive if you want, but I'm walking, she replied, heading toward the sound of breaking waves. I couldn't see the beach, but there was no mistaking it. I hurried to catch up. Caitlin reached for my hand and I clasped her cold fingers in mine. I couldn't take my eyes off her and I know she noticed, but she didn't seem to mind. Whatever we had was weird, I decided. We'd been through hell together, she'd saved my life and I'd done the same for her, even if I'd been the one who put her in danger in the first place. Yet I'd never taken her on a date. No movie, no dinner. Well, there was that disastrous drink in a nightclub that I'd prefer to forget, but that didn't count. My love for her was forged in blood and pain, and it would be a part of me for as long as I lived. But I'd hurt her too much for her ever to see me in the same way as I saw her. Maybe when her security guy retired, she'd let me take his place. Then at least I could protect her and keep her safe. Shit, I'd probably need a lot more training before she'd agree to that. After all, she could afford her own bodyguard. Why would she settle for me when she could have the best money could buy? Caitlin pressed against my side, pulling my arm around her to hold her against me. The ocean breeze in winter, I should have brought a coat. Automatically, I opened my jacket to share its warmth with her. With her nestled against my shirt, hope flowered in my heart. Of course I'd protect her. Keep her warm. Whatever she needed me to do. I'd give my life for her now because I knew she'd be all right without me. But that didn't mean I couldn't enjoy her closeness while it lasted. Cloudy skies turned the water gray, capped with white as the wind churned up waves that washed over the short jetty beside the much longer one. It wasn't the welcoming water I remembered from my childhood, but this bleakness suited the stark reality of adulthood. Life was no longer a stream of sunshine and sandcastles, shared with a sister I'd never see again. Caitlin tugged on my arm. Let's get tickets to the observatory before the ticket office closes. She pulled me inside the shop that housed the ticket office, a strange selection of maritime-themed knickknacks and a small museum with the history of the jetty. The black and white photos of sailing ships and steamships caught my attention, alongside some large color pictures of broken-off pylons where chunks of the jetty were missing. The forlorn pylons tugged at my memory. I was certain I'd seen them. A placard beside them described how a cyclone had destroyed the jetty in the 70s, years before I was born. How could I remember it then? Look at this. Caitlin exclaimed, holding up a statue of a buxom mermaid whose breasts were barely restrained by two tiny strung-together seashells. I don't know why anyone would wear such an uncomfortable bra. If mermaids exist, I hope someone's told them about women's liberation. She set the figurine carefully back on the shelf. Good thing they're just mythical, I replied. There was something in the statue's expression that looked like proud disdain. I wouldn't want to tell her she couldn't wear whatever mermaid fashion she wanted. Can we get 2 tickets for the observatory, please? I heard Caitlin ask and realized she was speaking to the women behind the shop counter. Both exchanged glances and shook their heads. It's closed for today. Visibility isn't all that good with the waves stirring everything up at the moment, anyway. The older woman pointed at the screen on the wall, which showed a murky green picture. The shadow of something tall and straight seemed to move in and out of focus. See? You can barely see the pylon. Come back tomorrow or on the weekend, when the weather's meant to be better. Or summer, when visibility's the best. But the sunset looks pretty from the end of the jetty if you're up for a walk, the younger one added. Romantic and all. She eyed me with a certain degree of calculation. I knew that look. Years ago I'd have winked and grinned, but now I turned my gaze to Caitlin. Do you still want to walk along the jetty? Caitlin beamed. Of course. We've come this far. It'd be a shame not to enjoy the view and a leisurely stroll. 45. Caitlin took my arm and we set off through the gate. Our footsteps thumped dully on the concrete, jarring with the hollow-sounding timber boards in my memories. This isn't how I remember the jetty, I blurted out. It was wood, I remember, all timber and old timber too. Grey from age, not because of concrete. I tapped the railway track with my shoe. And it was narrower too. There wasn't space to walk beside the tracks. And there weren't handrails on both sides either. I remember walking on the edge of the boards, having to put one foot in front of the other like I was on a balancing beam, until Alanna shouted at me and Dad made me get away from the edge. She walked right in the middle of the tracks. She was afraid of falling in. I laughed softly. She wasn't as tough back then. How tough had she really been, though? If Caitlin had survived her kidnapping, and Alanna hadn't? With Caitlin so delicate, Alanna should have had more of a chance against them. But somehow she gave up and left me to deal with the consequences. Identifying her dead body. Coping with her loss. seeking vengeance for her murder, and having to watch as they took Caitlin. I stumbled over a dead fish, which demonstrated that it wasn't quite dead yet, as it ballooned into an angry fishy ball. I kicked it, launching the blowfish back into the water. Dad took us fishing off this jetty. Just Alanna and I, we left Mum and Chris at home. I had to bait up her hooks with the squishy little prawns because she wouldn't touch them. They were too yucky, she said. We just had those little handlines, round plastic rings with line wrapped around them and a hook and sinker on the end. Dad had a rod and reel, but he was so busy helping us pull our fish off the hooks and baiting them up again that he didn't get to use it much. I think I caught 40 blowies that day, they just kept biting. I didn't understand why Dad wouldn't put them in the bucket though. Instead, he just unhooked them and let them flap around, blowing themselves up on the jetty until I kicked them off the edge. I peered over the side, but I couldn't see the one I'd thrown back. Maybe it had swum away to enjoy its good fortune. Caitlin glanced at me and smiled but didn't say anything. A seagull landed on the railing, screeching its displeasure at whatever had pissed it off. Alanna eventually gave up on catching fish and just sat next to me, watching my line. That's when Dad decided to give his rod a go. He baited it up, threw it over his shoulder, and I heard the line whiz out over the water. I looked just in time to see the seagull diving for something, then fly up again, flapping frantically. Dad started reeling in his line right away, but I didn't understand why until the seagull started flying toward us, even though it looked like it was trying to fly away. The stupid bird had gone for the bait and taken the hook as well. Dad tried to reel that seagull in so he could try and free it, but the closer he got, the more the bird flapped until it was almost at the end of the rod. It was so close. Dad dropped the rod on the jetty and tried to grab the seagull to cut it free. The bloody bird went berserk. It flew up, hook, rod and all, and then splashed down again because the rod was too heavy for it to carry. It splashed around on the surface for a bit before it took flight, without the line or the rod, which sank under the jetty. Dad started shouting and swearing at the stupid bird. Alanna giggled, and then I caught another fish. Dad packed everything up, but he had to wait until I'd managed to reel up my fish. He yanked it off the line and threw it at the seagull, but the bird flew away and the fish landed in the water instead. I smiled at the memory. When we got home, Mum went nuts. We'd been sitting on the rusty old tracks, dangling our legs off the edge of the jetty, and our pants were covered in rust stains. Alanna was horrified that she'd been walking around with a brown bum. She burst into tears and Mum blamed Dad for the whole mess, but it was my idea to sit on the train tracks. I kicked at the tracks beneath my feet now, which weren't rusty at all. This jetty isn't the same. It's like even my memories are gone. Stolen somehow, like Alanna was. I remember her as really tough when we were in high school and uni, but I guess she wasn't, not really. The way she shrieked and danced around in fright when she caught her first fish and it moved. Not tough enough to survive. What I'd give for her advice now on what to do about Caitlin. I mean, here we were together at the end of the jetty, with no one else around, and the sun setting over the ocean. I knew this sort of romantic shit worked. Any other girl 5 years ago, and I'd have grabbed her and kissed her until she was helpless to resist me. With Caitlin, I couldn't. She needed to resist me, just like I had to resist giving in to my feelings about her. But I wanted. Caitlin's eyes met mine, filled with sympathy and pain. I wanted to kiss it all away and turn her sadness to joy in my arms. Mine. No one else's. But I couldn't. I wasn't good enough for her. As if to taunt me, she pressed closer. It's even colder in the breeze out here, she said softly. Every bit of my being wanted to wrap myself around her and never let her feel the cold again, but I forced myself to pull away. Shit, it felt like I was tearing myself in two. I shrugged out of my jacket and draped it around her shoulders. Take it. You need it more than I do. A tear sparkled on her cheek, tinted with gold in the sunset, but she wiped it away. We should head back and get dinner. The ladies at the ticket office mentioned a fish and chip shop in town, Cod Rocks they said it was called. They have fresh Spanish mackerel and whiting. We could bring it back to the beach to watch the stars come out. She ducked her head to slip her arms into the sleeves of my jacket, before she zipped it up. Her arms folded across her chest, shutting me out of her warmth and her heart. Trust me to mess things up for her. At least I was good at something. Sure. Whatever you want, I replied dully. Shivering in the cold, I led the way back down the jetty to the shore. Wishing the stiff breeze could ice over my heart. 46. The sound of screaming jolted me awake. I was out of bed and charging across the hall before my brain had caught up with my body, but the thought of Caitlin in danger only quickened my stride. Of course I recognized her scream. It had haunted me for 5 years. I tried her door but it was locked. Shoving my shoulder against it, I cursed the sturdiness of wartime building materials, then remembered I was the one who'd locked it, at her request. Ignoring the sleepy onlookers who'd emerged from their rooms to find out what was going on, I snatched up the key from my dresser and frantically tried to fit it into the lock. My fingers were slippery with sweat as the screaming continued. Oh God, I couldn't lose her now. Not now. I wrenched the door open and strode into the room. A quick scan told me the windows were closed and Caitlin appeared to be alone, but she gasped for breath and let out another agonized scream. Nightmare. I dropped to my knees and reached for her, trying desperately not to listen to what she was screaming. If I let the words in, I'd be a gibbering mess on the floor and I couldn't help her. Besides, when she woke up, she'd tase me anyway. I just had to rouse her. Swallowing, I pulled her into my arms, tightening my hold as she struggled. One flailing fist struck me hard enough to summon stars, but I didn't let go. Her body might have recovered, but her mind was locked in a nightmare that I needed to free her from. Caitlin didn't deserve a messed-up head like mine. I heard my own voice murmur the same soothing litany that I'd said so many times in the past. Who I was, that I was here and that everything would be all right. This time it was true. A throat cleared behind me. Mate, I think you should step away from the girl. Beth's husband, who'd helped us with the pool table last night, stood in the doorway. His expression was grim. Not until she's, I glanced at Caitlin. Panicked wide-awake eyes stared back, awake. I eased her onto the pillow and rose. Probably best if you go back to your own room now, the man continued. Behind him stood a bathrobed Beth and a small crowd of pajama-clad, whispering onlookers. I wanted to shout at the lot of them. People judging what they didn't understand. Yes, I locked her in her room because she asked me to. Yes, I grabbed her while she was asleep and screaming at me to let her go. Yes, she's been horribly abused and it was my fault because I was there and did nothing to stop them. Yes, I'm a lower form of life than pond scum. And yes, I'm allowed to live, outside of prison no less, because she saved my life and spoke in my defense. Though I didn't deserve it. Instead, I shoved through them to my room and the faint hope of sleep. A forlorn hope, but one I clung to. Are you all right? Do you want me to call the police? I heard the man say. Yes and no. I already knew her answers, so I didn't stay to hear them. Get out of my way. Don't touch me. Caitlin's sharp tone cut through the low hum of strangers' voices. Nathan. Nathan, please don't go. I turned. She stood in the doorway, wearing a soft cotton nightdress that proclaimed to the world that she was no angel, playing with one of the thin straps as her eyes pleaded with me. Nathan, I want you to stay with me. She hugged herself, the way she used to when she was close to tears. If it wasn't dark, I knew I'd see the familiar shimmer. I couldn't refuse, and she knew it. As soon as I was close enough, she grabbed my hand and yanked me into her room, but someone's foot stopped her from closing the door behind her. I don't think that's a good idea. Let me call the police, the same man said. I'll be fine, Caitlin replied. Her clipped tone implied that no one else would be if they didn't follow her orders. If you need to call the police or an ambulance after I'm done with him, I'll let you know. An ambulance? Was she going to shoot me instead of using a taser? I waited for her to close the door before I said, if you're going to shoot me, better take me out into the bush where there won't be any witnesses. Burial's easier too. Plenty of caves and sinkholes south of here. Her eyes bored into mine. And you said you weren't suicidal. I shrugged. I'm not. But if you want to kill me, I won't fight you, that's all. And I wouldn't want you to get into trouble for what I see as justice. If you feel I need to die for what I've done, then I agree with you. Caitlin shook her head irritably. Nathan, I didn't ask you to stay so I could shoot you, okay? I wanted to thank you. Thank you for waking me up from that, and for being there to reassure me. It's been a long time since anyone, and I'm grateful not to have to deal with it alone. Do you have nightmares often? I asked, unable to stop myself. It was none of my business. None of my damn business, and she'd tell me so, right before she kicked me out into the condemning crowd outside. No. Honestly, I don't. Maybe once a week or a fortnight. It's just the memories and the stress and being in a new place and, well, I can't help but remember things around you. Her rueful look turned to panic as she tightened her grip on my hand. It's not your fault. It's not, I swear. Being in Perth stirs up the memories too. Please can you stay? She already knew my answer, but she'd asked anyway. You know I can't sleep with you. Even now I couldn't call my curse by its name. Impotence, hissing in my head like a snake. A limp snake. I know, but if I have any more dreams, you're the only person I trust to wake me. If anyone else touches me, unless it's you. You're the only one who can touch me without making me want to run, screaming in the opposite direction. Her watery smile didn't reach her frightened eyes. I knew what it was to be terrified of your own dreams. I nodded once. I'll get a blanket and a pillow, and I'll sleep on your couch. If you have any more bad dreams, I'll be here. Thank you. This time her smile was heartfelt. 10 minutes later, I stretched out on the sofa, my eyes fixed on her as I swore to guard her until morning. I'd even save her from her dreams if she needed it. There was nothing I wouldn't do for her. I only wished I could do more. 47. Sunlight and sweet singing. I knew it couldn't be heaven because I didn't belong there, but for a moment I wondered if someone had made a mistake. A hissing sound I hadn't noticed ceased, and so did the singing. I opened my eyes to Caitlin exiting the bathroom, a towel tucked tantalizingly around her breasts. Shit, my head wasn't the only part of my anatomy waking up. Of all the times for my dick to decide to check in. The towel came off and I bit down on my tongue to stop myself from moaning. I swallowed, trying to ignore the salty tang of blood. I should go. Caitlin's gentle laughter was music to my ears. I don't mind. You've seen it all before, Nathan. She slipped on some lacy little knickers. My dick shot up in salute. Fuck. Think of something, anything, to settle down. Caitlin screaming and squirming in my arms last night. Nope, that didn't work. I glanced again, just in time to see her turn as she fastened a matching lacy bra. Sweet handfuls of heaven. God, I wanted to slip my hands inside the cups and scoop her out like. Cold shower. I needed a cold shower. I scrambled off the sofa, bundling the blanket in front of me to hide what she did to me. No way in hell would she let me near her if she knew how much I wanted to help her out of that underwear and take her on the bed. I mumbled something about a shower and fled. 15 minutes later, still shivering from my wintry shower, I stumbled on half-numb feet to the dining room. Avoiding the coffee with a glass of orange juice, I set my breakfast beside Caitlin and slid into the chair next to her. She swallowed a mouthful of croissant. "Good morning." I mumbled a response through my toast. Even after 5 years, I couldn't stomach breakfast cereal, and it looked like she couldn't either, and watched as she popped a strawberry into her mouth. "Oh, you're up?" Beth seemed stunned to see me, but she managed to smile all the same. "Are you ready for your cooked breakfast now? The one you ordered yesterday?" I nodded, not remembering what I'd ordered yesterday. Pancakes or eggs or a whole buffet, I had no idea. Caitlin parted her lips to permit another strawberry inside. Dead bodies, morgues, hospital theaters with lots of blood, tears, the nauseating smell of disinfectant. Anything I could dredge up from my brain to stop myself from walking around with a hard-on all day. Shit, what was wrong with me this morning? Breakfast arrived in the form of a huge plate of steaming, well, everything really. I wasn't sure I could eat it all. I stuck half the grilled tomato in my mouth and bit down. Cooked to perfection. "So what were you planning to do today?" Beth asked cheerfully. I struggled to chew and swallow so I could answer. Caitlin beat me to it. Nathan and I were discussing the caves down south last night. I was hoping we might get to explore one today. I heard there were some unusual fossils from animals that fell down sinkholes and died in the caves, their bodies perfectly preserved. Is it true there was a thylacine, one of those Tasmanian tiger things? I thought they only lived in Tasmania. I choked. The caves. Sure, we talked about them, as a place to dump my dead body. My libido withered and perished. Beth and Caitlin were both looking at me. "Lake Cave, Nathan? Or would you prefer Jewel or Mammoth?" I coughed and managed to say, "Sure. Whatever you want." I shoveled a crispy piece of bacon in my mouth, relishing the taste. If I was going to die today, at least I'd get to enjoy my last meal. And death would be delivered by the hands of a beautiful woman I'd do anything for. Death row inmates never had it this good. 48. A gust of wind slammed the ticket office door, echoing like a gunshot. Nathan, who'd been crossing the deck to the start of the stairs, dropped to a crouch, covering his head in panic. I wasn't sure what had gotten into him this morning. He seemed frightened of his own shadow. Was it because of my nightmare last night, or something else entirely? He'd barely said a word to me in the car on the way down to Lake Cave. Well, he looks like he's one wrong word away from suicide. I haven't seen a case of PTSD that bad since the 4th of July in the US. Where do you bet he was stationed, Afghanistan or Iraq? I stopped mid-stride and stared at the man who'd spoken. What the hell did he know about it? I gritted my teeth as I replied, "There are worse things than war that can do that to a man." He grinned as if my cold gaze had no power over him. His eyes seemed unnaturally dark. "So you're his friend, girlfriend maybe? Get out while you can. You don't want to be the one to find him when he offs himself. No one needs to." Suicidal. I knew it, this prick knew it, but Nathan wouldn't admit it. I'd give anything to be able to help him, if only he'd let me in and tell me what he was thinking. "My love, are you scaring people? Maybe we should have spent the day at home," a gentle voice said. The woman who owned it kissed the man's lips and smiled. "Hey, if you want to chain me to the bed, you know I'm up for that, Mel. Like I said." His dark eyes bored into mine and I found I couldn't breathe. They weren't just dark, they were like black holes sucking at my soul. The man was evil. Ultimate evil and... Don't let him scare you, honey. He sees the worst in any situation. He's been through hell for longer than anyone should. Bringing him back is a challenge, but he's worth saving. I'm sure you understand. Sometimes they're strong for too long that they forget how to ask for help from those they love, and that's when a kick-ass heroine has to save the day. But not in a single blaze of glory. With patience and persistence and maybe even love. She cleared her throat. I realized her hand gripped my wrist while my fingers were firmly wrapped around the hilt of my hidden knife. I looked from her hand to her friend. His eyes didn't seem so dark anymore, in fact, they were the same light gray as the woman's. And he looked worried, concerned for the woman. Shit, he looked at her the way Nathan stared at me. My mouth opened but no sound came out. How had she touched me without me noticing? And was she talking about Nathan as if she knew him or her demon-beset friend? Angel, are you okay? Nathan rose from his crouch and continued walking toward me, quickening his pace. The strange woman removed her hand and it felt like she withdrew comfort with it. I think you know exactly what I mean, for you have your own hero to save. Good luck. She bobbed her head and took the questionably evil man's arm. All souls deserve a chance at redemption, don't they, my love? Her companion nodded, keeping his eyes firmly on the decking as they walked away. Honestly, Luce, I'm beginning to think chaining you to the bed wasn't such a bad idea after all. Her soft footsteps carried her down the stairs to the level below us. Of course it's not a bad idea. I suggested it. But it only works if you're there with me, the man replied, his voice fading as they descended. I forced myself to place my hands by my sides. I wanted to shake the strange woman's words out of my head, but they rang too true for that. From the worried look in Nathan's eyes to the way he broke into a trot when he thought I was in danger, I'd known it all along. After all these years, he still carried a torch for me that he was terrified to light. Is everything all right? I saw you reach for your knife and I thought you needed help. Did you know them? Did those people hurt you now or before? Were they? His eyes widened in what I recognized as fright. Nathan couldn't hack being my bodyguard anymore, no matter how much he wanted to protect me. Last night's nightmare had traumatized him more than it had me. Like the strange woman had said, it was the heroine's turn to kick ass. And the first one that needed a kick was mine. Enough stalling. I needed to see the house Mosen wanted to give me, so I'd stop worrying. Once I was no longer having nightmares about nothing, then I'd kick Nathan's supposedly sacred ass. I took his arm, trying to share some of the calm the woman had infused in me. I'm fine. I was just talking to that couple and I trailed off as the names they'd used sank in. I just had a really crazy thought. Do you think when God gets bored, he or she chains the devil up and tries to brainwash him into being a decent citizen? Nathan stared at me. I don't know. I'd have thought they played chess or arm wrestled or something like that, with souls or the world at stake. I don't think chains and bondage would be. He doubled over, breathing hard. Nathan. Oh shit, I shouldn't have, let's just go home. Stuff the caves, it was a bad idea, and I'm scared of the dark anyway. Give me the keys. I'll drive. I fished the keys out of his pocket. Let's get you home. 49. Maybe halfway back to Bustleton, just after yelling up, the car started making a strange sound. I strained my ears, trying to work out what it was. Nathan drowned it out as he turned the music up. Stop it. Turn that down. I'm trying to work out what that noise was, I scolded, clicking the stereo off. Nathan cleared his throat uncomfortably. It was me. My stomach's growling because I'm starving. Any chance we can stop for lunch? I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the map from the tourist office. Beth had given it to me at breakfast, marking the caves and some chocolate places she recommended we visit. Pick a winery along the way and we'll pull in there for lunch. Lots of them have restaurants. I don't drink wine, Nathan said, shuddering. I could go a cold beer though. An arrowed sign ahead pointed the way to a brewery on the left. Beer it is then. I indicated and turned off Caves Road. The side street meandered through paddocks until it ended in a gravel car park, outside a pretty ordinary-looking building with a tin roof. Between the pool table on the veranda and tables and chairs scattered around the grass and inside the place, it looked like it served something to make people want to stay. Not that there were many around. After 2 on a weekday was too late for lunch, for everyone except Nathan apparently. We ordered our food and drank some oddly named beers while we waited for lunch to be prepared. I wasn't sure what Nathan's murky brew was called, nor what was in it, but I'd capitulated and ordered a beer that claimed to have been made with strawberries. After one mouthful I figured it was true, but beer and strawberries were a strange mix. I took another sip, trying to decide if I liked it, or I hated it. A sharp crack made Nathan shoot to his feet, scanning the room for the source of the shot. I twisted in my seat and realized the strange round table I'd dismissed earlier was a peculiar pool table. The report I'd heard came from a bloke's smooth break of the balls. Nathan's swaying drew my eyes back to him. He'd managed to knock his beer over, and even his frantic efforts to clean the beer splashes off his shirt didn't hide how badly his hands were shaking. Nathan sure was a nervous wreck today. Had he spotted some risk to our safety that he hadn't told me about? Or were his demons catching up with him, overwhelming him so that he needed help he was too proud to ask for, and the sudden sound had just brought his shattered nerves to breaking point? Recalling the strange woman's words, I summoned a smile and said, "Would you like to play a game of pool after he's done? I want a rematch after last night. I don't think I've ever played so badly in my life." Nathan seemed to relax a bit as he agreed, then headed up to the counter to order a replacement beer. His hands shook less as he ate his nachos, thankfully, as the abundant fresh salsa would have gone everywhere otherwise. I let him break when it was our turn on the pool table, knowing he'd do a better job of it than I could. He winced at the sound, though he tried to hide it. I said nothing, just moving forward to take my shot. If anything, I played worse than I had last night. Nathan was going to win for sure. After he'd sunk about half his balls and I'd managed to sink exactly one, and one of his at that, I summoned the courage to mention the house. "Do you mind if we take a detour on the way back to the guest house?" I asked casually, lining up my next shot. "What? Where?" He stiffened as if I'd shoved my cue up his bum. My shot went wide again. I sighed and straightened. "The house my cousin wants me to inherit. It's on the way back, and I think worrying about it is one of the reasons I'm having nightmares again. The sooner I see it, the sooner I can decide what to do with it. And the sooner I could take Nathan on a proper holiday with the proceeds. It had been a mistake to take him somewhere so close to Perth, where he jumped at his own shadow. A deserted tropical island maybe, where no one knew us and they only had one flight in a day, or better yet, once a week." Nathan relaxed again. "Oh. Sure. Whatever you want." In 3 shots, he sank his 2 remaining balls and the black. "Do you want me to beat you a 3rd time at the guest house tonight, or would you like another attempt on this table first?" He carefully chalked his cue before returning it to the wall rack. I set mine in place beside it. "You're not going to beat me. Violence isn't your style, Nathan. But I'll lose my next game at the guest house, I think. Time to go see that house while we still have a bit of daylight left." 50. I gave in to curiosity and asked, "So where is this house?" "Osprey Bay." I spluttered. "You can't be serious. That's where Alanna's body was dumped." That's the beach where you. Did she know how few houses there were in Osprey Bay? Hers could be right next door to where she'd been held captive. Hell, Alanna could have been murdered on her back lawn. And while she'd been locked in that underground dungeon, I'd lived in a house there for weeks, agonizing over a decision that should have been crystal clear. "I know. But I've inherited this property there, and I need to see it to decide whether to sell it, or keep it. The real estate agent said it's both a goldmine and heaven on earth, which doesn't help me decide anything except not to trust the real estate agent. She managed a weak grin. I hesitated. I'll come to the house, but I'm not setting foot on that beach again. I'll have nightmares just thinking about it. I don't even need to see it. Caitlin's fingers crept over mine, clinging tightly. Nathan, I need to go there at some point. I need to see where I almost died. Where you almost died. You don't have to come with me, but I need to stand there. It's part of letting go. Fuck. The only thing worse than me going there was her alone there without me. No. I won't let you go there by yourself. Her eyes blazed. Nathan, you try and stop me and I will fucking tase you and leave you where you fall. You don't control me. You could never control me, and if you think I'll let you get away with being an overprotective asshole, I've changed my mind. I'll go with you. Call me whatever names you want. I'll go crazy with worry if you go without me. I'm terrified of seeing that bloody beach, but what frightens me more is you there alone. The last time I left you there alone, I had to kill someone, and I don't know what he did to you while I wasn't there. She grinned fiercely. So you're coming? Don't worry, I'll hold your hand, Nathan. Anyone else comes after me and they won't survive to regret it. I've had enough of living in fear. My head told me to be terrified. Caitlin had killed, and she'd do it again if she had to. I didn't doubt that for a minute. And if she wanted to shoot me on the beach where I'd failed her, so be it. I'd open my arms and welcome justice at her hands. What scared me is how much it turned me on, because I wanted her. Bad. Shit, how fucked up did that make me? I stayed silent as we headed north and then west on Osprey Bay Road. I didn't say a word as we passed the resort, though I knew there were only a handful of houses between the resort and the national park. And one of them was the one where... There. Number 100, she said in satisfaction. The black bulbous driveway marker taunted me as we pulled up beside it. Sure enough, it bore the number I'd never noticed before. Caitlin leaned out the window. That looks like one of those old World War II sea mines that sank ships. I didn't think we had any of those here. Must have washed up here, carried on the current. I hope it's not still armed. She accelerated slightly along the rutted driveway as I fought down my panic. So much for not going anywhere near places that scared me. What? What is it? Caitlin asked, staring at me. I had to swallow 3 times before I could get the words out. Angel, this is their house. The house your kidnappers lived in. And that, I pointed a shaking finger at a track leading from the house into the national park, that is the way to the bunker where they almost killed you. I think your so-called cousin is a lying sack of shit who's trying to kill you, and we should get the hell out of here. You could be right, Caitlin said grimly, unbuckling her seatbelt. But no one knows we're here, so no one's expecting us. This could be our only chance to see this place without a welcoming party. She opened her door and stood on the gravel drive. Come on, Nathan, let's lay some ghosts to rest. And if any of them aren't ghosts yet? I couldn't help asking. My avenging angel grinned as she pulled a bulky metal torch and her taser from the boot of the car. Demons, you mean? Then we can fucking tag team them. I want my life back. My mouth went dry. Shit, how could I back down when she had so much courage? I looked like a coward compared to her if I didn't do this. And I'd never forgive myself if anything else happened to her. She could shoot me later, but not before I'd protected her one last time. I took a deep, shaky breath, praying my voice wouldn't squeak with the terror coursing through my veins. Then let's check out the bunker first before it's completely dark outside. 51. So this is where I was held. Caitlin's voice was flat as her torch swept across the floor. She didn't mention the dark stains that still streaked the concrete. Yes, I replied hoarsely, clearing my throat. I glanced at the door, lying in a nest of crime scene tape. Dust had covered my boot marks, so you could barely see where I'd kicked it off the hinges the last time I'd been here. I'm so sorry. If it wasn't for my parents, if they hadn't taken Alanna. She died here, didn't she? Caitlin asked sharply. I don't know where she died, I whispered. The police said she'd already been dead for a few hours when she was dumped on the beach. They never found where she'd been killed. The bloodstains here aren't mine. I was near the door when the bitch cut me, tied up too tightly to move this far. They killed her here. She must have bled out before they dumped her body on the beach, so it'd be found. Here, no one would have found her. Caitlin's voice sounded so clinical, it was scary. My feet moved on autopilot, carrying me to her side. I needed to see her gory find for myself. I stumbled over the rubble littered across the floor, almost falling. I managed to right myself before I face-planted, but the torch flew out of my hands and smashed against the brick wall. The light died, leaving only the little keyring torch in Caitlin's hand. She held out her other hand to me, keeping her torch beam steady on the dark streaks on the floor. My fingers clasped hers for strength as I looked down at my sister's last live resting place. A glint caught my eye and I dropped to my knees, scrabbling in the dust. Half hidden beneath a broken brick was a twisted scrap of silver. I blew the dust off it and held it up to Caitlin's torch. The tiny red crystal in Alanna's crushed signet ring winked at me like the eye of some sort of demon. Oh God! I barely managed to get the words out. My fingers formed a fist around the precious piece of silver, as if by holding it tightly I could hold back the tears threatening to spill from my eyes. I didn't want Caitlin to see me cry. I rushed across the room, stubbing my toes on bricks, but I didn't stop. Taking the rough steps two at a time, I burst into the bush at the surface, breathing hard. The sun had well and truly set and clouds hid the moon. I couldn't even see the stars. I could see the shadowy bulk of the house, and that's what I staggered towards, even as tears blurred my vision and tree roots tried to trip me. I blundered through a prickly bush and plunged on, but the ground vanished beneath my feet and I fell. I heard the crack before I felt it. After that, all I could hear was my own agonized voice, swaying loud enough to wake the dead. 52. My vision was hazy, so it took me a minute to realize that Caitlin was close enough for her torch beam to illuminate me. I was sprawled across some rusted, corrugated iron in the bottom of a circular pit. My right leg had snapped over the edge of the bricks around. It looked like I had an extra knee between the first and my ankle. Fuck, it hurt. Nathan! Nathan! Caitlin shouted. She stood on the lip of the hole, staring at me. I wondered how long she'd been calling me. I can't get up, I told her. It's broken. I waved limply at my double-jointed leg. A dark stain started seeping through my jeans, much like the bloodstains in the bunker. The torchlight stole the color and turned my blood to black. It's all right, Nathan. I'm going to help you, she said calmly, placing the torch carefully on top of the bricks. She sat on the edge, lowering herself to the ground beside me. Waist deep in the pit, she edged around the rusted iron to reach me. Don't, I groaned as her light touch sent pain shooting up my leg. We have to get you to hospital. I should splint this though before we can move you, her soothing voice continued as if I hadn't said a word. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Here. Call for help. You can't lift me out by yourself. Please don't leave me here. She took the phone from my fingers and dialed 000. I heard her coolly request an ambulance, then state the address and say she'd wait for them by the house to guide the paramedics to where I'd fallen into a disused water tank. She ended the call and handed the phone back to me. Her lips touched my forehead. I'm going back up to the house for the first aid kit in the car, and to see if I can find something to use for a splint. No, Caitlin, please. Don't leave me here alone in the dark, I begged. Like I did to her, alone in the bunker in the dark as they heard her. God, talk about ironic. I deserved to be left here to die. She wouldn't even need to shoot me. I'll be right back, Nathan. You hold that phone in case they call for directions. She hoisted herself easily onto the lip of the bricks, her boots level with my face for a moment before they swung up and out of sight. Please? I called after her, but I'm not sure if she heard. The crunch of her footsteps faded into the dark as my phone's backlit screen went black. She deserved her revenge, leaving me to rot in this hidden hole. Fuck, if she wanted me dead, she should stab me like she did Simon, or shoot me the way she slaughtered Laura. Fuck suicide. Fuck justice. I wasn't going to curl up and die in the dark. If she could climb out of this hole, so could I. I stretched my arms up, hooking my fingers around the bricks so I could haul myself upright onto my good leg. I paused to swear as the pain almost made me pass out. This hurt worse than being shot, and watching my foot dangle limply was making me queasy. I swung around, grunting as my bad leg gave another twinge. I wrapped my hands around the trunk of that shrub that dropped me into this mess and heaved until my hips rested on the top layer of bricks. Panting, I paused for a moment before I used all my strength to pull again. Stretched out on the sand, I could hear my breath whistling as I inhaled. If I had to crawl the whole way, I had to get to the house. Or, failing that, the driveway up to the road. That's where there'd be an ambulance and help. I dug my fingers into the pale sand, dragging my body behind me. I let out a steady stream of swearing so that anyone nearby would hear me and hopefully help me. My vision blurred, but I could see the dark house, and that's where I was headed. A bolt of agony lanced through my leg and I yelped, barely recognizing the voice as my own. I looked back, holding my phone out to light up the problem. My dangling foot was caught on a tree root. Shuffling back through the sand, it took me a few panicked minutes to free myself before I could start moving forward again. It felt like I'd been crawling forever. Fuck, maybe I would be crawling forever, for the rest of it I had left anyway. Caitlin wasn't coming back. She'd left me to the fate I deserved. How many times had I headed through the dark to the bunker and not stumbled into the treacherous pit? She didn't need me anymore, and karma had come back to bite my ass big time. She'd just been biding her time as I got complacent. I paused to rest, gasping for breath. My vision was starting to dim. I couldn't see the house. The last thing I saw before everything faded to black was an exquisitely small boot. It had to be a hallucination, because there wasn't enough light to see Caitlin's boot in anything but my imagination. 53. He's awake. Someone go get Dr. Miller. I blinked and the light blinded me. I had a hangover from hell and I couldn't even remember what I'd drunk. And why did my leg hurt so much? Oh shit, whatever I'd drunk wasn't going to stay drunk. A vomit bag appeared in front of my face and I heaved, coughed and spluttered until all I brought up was biller. Maybe I hadn't had that much to drink after all. Or maybe they'd pumped my stomach while I was unconscious and this was just. Morphine withdrawal really sucks, but you got the good stuff, what with your broken leg and all. This time I recognized that the voice had an owner, a grinning one, even though the orderly was holding a bag of vomit in one hand. I'll just get rid of this and I'll be right back with something to wash the taste out of your mouth. You've just missed the lunch trolley, but I think the ladies will make an exception. He darted out of the room, his tied-back dreadlocks swaying like tentacles behind him. I surveyed the room and found nothing more interesting than my own body, with my leg immobilized in a cast most of the way up my thigh. My memories returned with a kick in the teeth as soon as I saw that. I'd broken it, running from the bunker into some rust-lined death pit, and then hauled myself out when Caitlin left me to die. So much for suicidal. When it came down to it, I did want to live after all. I bet she'd laugh if she knew. Orderly Dread's dude returned with a full meal tray, but even the smell made me nauseous again. I grabbed the glass of water and pushed the rest of it away. After I'd gulped down the liquid, I tried to find the right words. "Has Caitlin come to visit me?" His confusion sent my heart plummeting before he'd even opened his mouth. "Nope, no Caitlin's. Just the doctor. You got a guardian angel worth its weight in gold when you scored a doctor that hot. She makes me want to meet a shark surfing one morning just so I can end up in her tender hands." A giggle stopped him dead. "Josh, if a shark bites your backside when you're surfing, you know one of the qualified doctors here will be stitching you up, not me. I'm only here until Nathan's discharged." Josh flushed and mumbled something as he left. "Angel," I breathed. "He told me you hadn't come to visit. Just some hot doctor?" she asked, raising her eyebrows. "Dr. Alanna Angel Miller, thank you very much. I earned it." Now it was my turn to blush. "I didn't mean it like that. I forgot that you're all qualified and stuff now. Sometimes it feels like 5 years haven't passed and we're the same as we were then, only you're better. And me, I'm worse," I wanted to say, but I didn't dare. She didn't deserve the excuse for a man that I'd become. She should have run and left me to die. "I'll help you get better too," she said, lowering herself into the plastic visitor chair like it was a throne. "Locking up the past and not telling anyone about it is eating you up inside. I can see it. You should talk to me, Nathan. Tell me about your nightmares and your memories and let me help you banish them like you did for me." I pressed my lips together and shook my head. "Your sister will have you committed. She's got Dr. Hogan and a lot of medical reports on her side." I laughed. "Even if she does, I'll be out in a week. I'm not hallucinating. I'm not a danger to anyone but myself, and I know all the right answers to the depression tests to make me sound sane. If I tell you what I did, will you kill me like we did the others? I'm no less guilty than any of them. Will you forgive me and give me the mercy of a clean end?" Her expression was unreadable. "I forgave you years ago. I told you that before I left for Melbourne. But it wasn't enough for you to leave your job and come with me. I could have helped you then, but you wanted to go save the world, one terrorist at a time, and mess your mind up worse." I laughed so hard I nearly choked. "What job?" "I lost my job before you left. I was an unemployed bum with no degree and no references. The Dole office got me trained as a security guard, because that's what they figured I was good at, and I've been working as one ever since. The compensation money I got paid, the ex gratia thing? It was barely enough to cover the cost of a car to replace mine. Not even a new car, just a second-hand one, something cheap. You're right. I am worse. I didn't deserve you then, and I sure as hell don't deserve you now. You should have left me in the bush to die. That's what I deserve." "Damn it, Nathan." Her fist slammed into the bed, jarring my leg and sending pain shooting through it. I let out an agonized whimper before I bit my tongue, knowing I deserved the pain. "Shit, I'm sorry. You saved my life and nursed me back to health with a single-mindedness that even I can't summon for my patients. You know that all I had in my head was vengeance, the whole time I was in hospital, and when I was supposed to be recovering? I would have happily died to know I was taking out the last of those bastards with me. And they are gone. All of them. I saw the bodies and so did you. You've made amends for whatever you did. You never hurt me, but you went without sleep, without your family, without your own damn sanity to put me back together again, and show me that life was worth living. If you'd personally murdered my whole family and then tried to kill me, you'd have made amends a dozen times over for, oh God. I'm sorry." Caitlin flung her arms around me and I buried my face in her shoulder to hide the tears. Tears of self-pity that I was at least 25 years too old for. But they just wouldn't stop. If nothing else could put her off, maybe this disgusting display would do it. "I love you, Nathan. Talk to me and let me help you," she whispered. "I won't give up on you. I swear I won't. I owe you my life." I forced myself to pull away from her, wiping my nose on my sleeve. "You wouldn't say that if you knew what I'd done." She folded her arms. "Try me." I stared into her eyes. Those perfect, dark pools that drew me in from the first moment I saw her. I hung my head. "I can't." She smiled and kissed my cheek. "Then I guess you'll just have to put up with me until you can. And you might be surprised about afterwards." It was on the tip of my tongue to talk about restraining orders, but we both knew I wouldn't. Even if it tortured me to see her, I'd cherish every moment until she left me again. "Oh, I almost forgot." She clasped her hands together, then slowly drew them apart and held something out. "This is yours. I found it in the dirt you dragged yourself through. It must have fallen out of your pocket. I hope you don't mind. I've been wearing it so I could give it back to you the moment you woke up." Alanna's signet ring glittered on her palm. Scratched and warped, yet unmistakably hers. Caitlin had cleaned it and tried to twist it back into shape, but the damage was still there. I took it with shaking hands and attempted to slip it onto my smallest finger. Even Caitlin laughed when it sat like a little crown on my fingertip, too small to even make it over my fingernail. I swallowed. "You keep it. Then if anything happens to me, at least I'll know that someone still cherishes her memory, even if you never knew her." "Nathan. Please?" My voice died. She nodded and slipped it back onto her finger, the one where she'd one day place an engagement ring. Or a wedding ring. Her fingers were so tiny compared to Alanna's. For a moment, staring at my ring on her hand, I dared to hope. Her hand was warm in mine as I brought it to my lips. "I'll take care of it until you're ready for me to return it," she promised. My heart plummeted again. Nothing lasted forever, and it was only a matter of time before she left me again for good. 54. When we pulled up in front of my place, my heart sank. The last place I wanted to be was the house I shared with Chris. Grimly, I hauled myself out of the car and struggled with my crutches. "What is it? Do you want me to grab some more of your pain meds?" Caitlin asked, looking worried. I shook my head. "No, I'm good. I'm just thinking about how much I wish I was going back to your place instead of staying here with my sister. She'll flip when she finds out I've managed to break my leg." Caitlin seemed unusually nervous. I wasn't sure I'd ever seen her wring her hands before. "I'm sorry. But there's no way you could make it up 6 flights of stairs to my place. And if we did manage to get you up, I don't know how we'd get you down again." I grinned. I had a few ideas. And having her to myself in her house, alone, certainly featured in them. The pain pills must have been making me loopy. I was having sexy thoughts, and they were definitely having an effect. "Oh, hello." I figured I should probably get inside before Caitlin realized I'd hoisted a flagpole, ready to communicate my surrender to her. Oh God, and I needed to take a piss. 3 hours of driving after being on an IV drip for days were a bad combination. With Caitlin's help holding the door, I lurched into the house and the blessed bathroom. I took my time, seeing as I wasn't looking forward to getting back out there. Even washing my hands was a challenge when my crutches slipped to the floor, and I didn't know how to pick them up again. How had Caitlin managed when she couldn't walk? She was amazing, I decided. A walking miracle. Fuck, dropped it again. Just a couple more inches and I'd be able to reach it. I managed to get my crutches under me again, and opened the bathroom door. The sound of shouting grew in volume as I labored to get me and my crutches through the doorway and out into the hall. "Leave him alone. Chris demanded. You have no idea what he's been through. First our sister, then you. When you dumped him last time, it broke him. The only pieces I'll be picking up this time are the bits of your broken body, if you hurt him again. Fuck off and leave us alone. Do you know how to break a man? Caitlin didn't wait for her to reply. First, you take away the one person he loves most and slaughter them in the most brutal way possible. And you make sure he knows about it. Then you tell him you know who did it, and tantalize him with the whiff of revenge. But you don't give it to him. Instead, you show him the girl of his dreams and tell him that he has to hurt her, just like his loved one was. And if he doesn't, they'll kill her and torture someone else he loves instead. And this time they'll make him watch. She paused and I struggled to stay silent. And after he's done everything they asked or refused and tried to save everyone's lives, they don't kill him. They throw him to the police as the culprit for both crimes until the grief overwhelms him and he takes his own life, because he can't live with what he's done. What they forced him to do. There was the sound of a zip being forced down and fabric sliding over skin. These scars are the price your brother and I paid to save your life. They carved your fucking name into my flesh as a threat to him. So don't you dare tell me I don't know what he's been through. I had to look into his eyes every day as he shared my pain, and there are no drugs to numb the agony he went through. Chris's voice wavered as if she was about to cry, the tears only held back by a thin dam of anger. You think you're the one he loves most? Yes, damn it, she is the one I love most. And I can never tell her because I don't deserve her. No, Caitlin said quietly. The girl he loved most was Alanna. I'm the girl of his dreams. Dreams that turn into nightmares every night. No, she countered. He dreams of her. Not you. That's what he tells his doctor and you. Lies to keep you from the painful truth. Your brother was abducted, just like Alanna and I were, but he was forced to hurt me instead of being tortured. And it broke him. All that time he helped me heal and he was hurting just as much. I owe him the same, and you won't stop me from taking him anywhere he wishes to go. To hell with you and your sheltered illusions. You can't help your brother. I can, and I'll do it too. A pause. You know what? I don't have to listen to your shit. It's a wonder Nathan does. Tell him I'll come over tomorrow afternoon to check on him. I reached the lounge room just in time to see the front screen door swing shut behind Caitlin. I made it to the steps to the front door, but crutches and stairs were a nightmare I couldn't negotiate yet, so I rounded on Chris instead. My sister's mouth was wide open as she stared at me, taking in my crutches and walking cast before her face turned red with anger and she turned to yell at Caitlin's departing back. Don't you dare. By tomorrow afternoon, he'll have taken out a restraining order against you. I laughed as Caitlin raised one arm and gave Chris the one-fingered salute. I'll do it, Chris said through gritted teeth. She did that to you, didn't she? I'll drive you to the police station so they can see. She's not coming in here again. I cleared my throat. Actually, I managed to fall into a hole and break my leg all by myself. She called an ambulance and stayed with me until the hospital released me. Chris snorted. I bet she set you up just so she could get you back into bed and nurse you back to health between her thighs. That girl's full of shit. She's not, I said softly, my voice so carefully controlled that every word was clear. She and I did go through hell to save your life. And she's forgiven me for my part in it because she knows why. And you know what? I'm not sure I'll ever forgive myself for it because I'm not sure her sacrifice was worth it. Maybe I should have let them take you instead. And if you go to a police station and accuse her of a crime, you'll have the police and ASIO doing everything in their power to shut you up, because of what that girl's witnessed. You're not a lawyer yet, Chris, and trying to take on federal security legislation you don't understand is just fucking stupid. Her eyes filled with tears, but her face was still screwed up in anger. I'm just trying to take care of you, like Alanna would. I shook my head. You're not Alanna or our parents, and you never will be. She never tried to control my life because she knew she couldn't. Stay out of my life, Chris, and the only thing I ever want to hear you say to or about Caitlin is how sorry you are for what you've said to her. Or I'll tell Mum and Dad about your string of biker boyfriends, and we'll see how you like someone telling you how to live your life. I hobbled away, leaving her to her disturbing thoughts. For a moment I was relieved that Chris knew and I didn't have to be the one to tell her. Relief died in the realization that she also knew I was responsible for everything Caitlin had been through. Fuck it. Maybe it'd make her decide I wasn't worth saving and she'd finally leave me alone. 55. What do you do when meeting a man who employed thuggish bodyguards and gifted you with the house where you were held captive and almost killed? He might have been family, but that didn't mean I had to trust him. I didn't know him. Didn't know whether he'd want to kill me, kidnap me or kiss me. Didn't even know what he looked like. And I didn't have Nathan here to hold my hand if I felt frightened. Or kill for me if things went wrong. And I didn't want him here, I told myself. I didn't want him mixed up in my family's mess. He'd been messed up by them enough already. If Mosen wanted to kill me, Nathan wouldn't be able to stop him anyway. But he'd been the landlord of a known terrorist. Surely that meant he was under surveillance. I brightened a little at the thought. ASIO might not have been much use protecting me before, but they were better than nothing. Maybe they'd improved over the last 5 years, especially as Mott, Nathan's dodgy old boss, didn't work there anymore. The big question was whether to arrive early, so I could choose a table and scope him out the moment he came in, before he saw me, or to arrive late, so I could see if he'd brought his bodyguards or an anti-terrorist tail that I could wave down for help if things turned bad. Force of habit 1, I entered the cafe 15 minutes early and chose a corner table. I was armed with both a knife and a taser, plus I had some pepper spray in my bag. I prayed I wouldn't have to use any of them. I glanced around the cafe, hoping I'd recognize an ASIO agent if I saw them. I tried not to laugh when I caught Naveed's nod and wave. The man had aged, growing gray hair he hadn't had 5 years ago, but he also looked like the intervening time had hardened him. If he was here, it was no coincidence. When Mosen arrived, I wouldn't be alone at all. So much for not knowing him. A short, athletic man with dark hair entered, and I knew immediately he was Mosen. The expensive suit and shoes only confirmed it. He peered around as if the bright afternoon sun had blinded him to the dim interior of the cafe, and I waved to get his attention. His smile of recognition seemed professional and practiced. This man was dangerous. I clenched my fists. So what if he was dangerous? So was I. He held up a finger and mouthed, "One moment," as he paused at the counter to order before crossing the floor to my table. "You have not ordered anything, Kayana. May I buy you coffee?" At my hesitation, he added, "If you are worried about accepting a drink from a stranger, consider it a tiny advance on your inheritance." Grudgingly, I asked for a cappuccino and one of the strawberry tarts I'd seen as I walked in. He returned to the counter, paid, and made his way back to the table. As he removed his jacket, draped it over the back of his chair, and enthroned himself, his eyes seemed to be drinking me in. There was no lust in his gaze, just satisfaction, I thought. If he were the villain in a movie, he'd give a pretty impressive monologue, my mind added, and I had to swallow my burst of laughter. "I would like to hug you, but I don't think you would feel comfortable with that yet, so I would like to shake your hand instead. I am Mosen Rezae, a cousin of your mother's." I took the proffered hand and accepted the light pressure of his fingers as I shook them. "I am so sorry for her loss, Kayana." I pulled my hand back. "You know my name isn't Kayana." He nodded. "Yes, but it is the name she gave you, and you did not tell me what else I should call you instead." I reflected for a moment before replying, I think Kayana's as good as anything, don't you? You don't know anything about me, or you'd never have sent me to that house. Do you know what happened there? Despite my resolve to stay calm, I could already feel my temper rising. I forced myself to focus on my breathing, keeping it slow and steady. His smile lifted his lips but didn't reach his eyes. I know more than you might guess, and I'm sure you have questions, but I will ask you to keep those until I have said what I must. I would like to talk about. I'm not interested in what you want, I interrupted. You may come from a country where men are considered second only to God and women are worthless, but you're in Australia now, mate, and you sent me to a house where someone tried to kill me. I want answers or you don't deserve my time. I don't care how much money you're offering. If you're not answering my questions, you don't get another minute of my time. I rose. You are certainly Fatima's daughter, with a fire I know she'd be proud of. He pulled out his wallet and ripped something out. I would like to talk about my sister. This is my sister. He slapped a photograph on the table. I squinted at it, then grabbed it and held it up so I could see it better. The picture showed a young man and two conservatively dressed women, all with the same dark hair, seated on a sofa. The man was Mosen. The girl who looked like me held a blanket-wrapped bundle that might have been a baby. Her smile matched the man's as they beamed at the camera. Mum. The other woman's glower made me want to take a step back because I knew it well. Instead, I sank into my seat. My sister's name was Lilapa, but when she moved to Australia with her second husband Michael Page, she changed it to Laura Page. She died 5 years ago from a combination of poison, asphyxiation, and a gunshot to the head. I met his eyes. She was alive when I shot her. And it was toilet cleaner. Then I owe you a debt, he responded, but first I think I need to tell you about what happened before my sister died, so you understand. Under the table, I slipped my hand into my bag to arm my taser. Let the monologuing commence. When he tried to kill me, I'd be ready for him.